Good day, everyone. I am Proceso Perturbos III, and together with the team, we'll be talking about evolution and development. It cannot be denied that evolution is the central theme in biology. Evolution and development had always walked side by side in the course of time. There are three things that would help us untangle the relationship between evolution and development. They are macroevolution, the tracing of the primordial animal, and the question of what really happened in evolution. Before we start, let's have a short activity. Try to guess the word from the clues and jumbled letters that we have provided. The answers will be given as we progress in the discussion. Feel free to pause and play and try to guess the items. For the first item, we have here three pictures. The first are a set of birds, which is the work of the third picture, and the second one looks like a phylogenetic tree. For the next item, what looks like a shell on the first picture and the fish on the second, as well as a very familiar button on the third. For the next item, we have here planes and axes, as well as an outline of a human and some parts of the insect. The next is a house, a container, a DNA, and what looks like a spinal cord. For the next item, it looks like a front and back of the human and an insect. For the next part, we have what looks like a crustacean and a bee with its head, thorax, and abdomen. Very simple or familiar word. And for the last part, we have here what looks like a human development with different body parts having significant changes. Same goes with the crab, its pincer and antenna having significant changes. All right. So to start with our discussion about evolution and development, we'll start with macroevolution. Macroevolution is that would help us untangle its relationship with developmental biology. And they are namely molecular taxonomy, phylogeny of animals, and fossil records. In discussing evolution, it is inevitable to discuss taxonomy. Like from the highest levels, like the domain, kingdom, up to the lowest, like the genus and species, we refer with each level or to each level as a taxon, if you can remember. For the animal species, they are grouped into genera, family, order, classes, and even the highest grade taxa are in the form or in the phyla level or the phylum level. Furthermore, if you can recall, each taxon is a clade consisting of the complete set of descendants from a common ancestor. This is important to have a backtrack or a review on this because as we look into basal and derived characteristics, we tend to focus on certain taxa which could actually be a clade in itself. Going further, as we are discussing with macroevolution, it's high time that we try to contrast it with microevolution. As we know, evolution is the process of how living things change over time. It can happen on a small scale or a big scale. So when we talk about small changes within a population, we call it microevolution. And this can happen very quickly. Like there's a frequency of a gene for brown coloration in beetles increasing in just one generation. So that's microevolution because it's in a small scale and the level of the species. Microevolution rely on mechanisms like mutation, migration, genetic drift, and even natural selection. On the other hand, macroevolution is about changes that happen over a longer period of time, and they can result in the creation of a new species. For example, the evolution and radiation of the dinosaur lineage is an example of a macroevolution, as we can see here in the picture. So we can't see macroevolution happening directly, but we can study it by looking at the diversity of life over time. And As we study, it includes evidences such as fossils and even living things. So just to wrap up, microevolution happens with a single population and can't be beyond a single species. And it's observed over short periods of time, while macroevolution happens on a bigger scale and can result in the creation of a new species. Both rely on the same mechanisms of evolutionary change. And when we study macroevolution, we look at multiple lines of evidences. In relation to evolution and developmental biology, we look into homology and analogy to describe similarities in the different organisms, or rather in the development of different organisms. So homology here refers to similarities in the developmental patterns that are shared by organisms or shared between organisms because they have the same or they have this shared ancestry. Like say for example, in our example here we have the human hand, the cat's feet, the whale's flipper, and the bat's wing. Even though the limbs themselves are different in terms of their function, they share a similar pattern of development because the developmental processes that form the limbs or the limb buds are controlled by similar genes and are inherited from a common ancestor. Analogy, on the other hand, refers to similarities in the developmental process or patterns that are not shared due to their um, ancestry, but rather they are due to convergent evolution. Like say, for example, we have here the shark's fin, the penguin's wing, and the dolphin's flipper. They have similar function, however, they are not from the same structure because they develop through different processes and are controlled by different genes. They evolved separately due to the similar demands of their environment. So in biology, we often use the term basal and derived to describe characteristics of the organism. And these terms are actually closely related to homology and analogy. As we all know, basal characteristics are those that are shared by a group of organisms that are considered to be primitive or ancestral. So these characteristics are often homologous, meaning they are similar due to their shared ancestry. So for example, we try to give like the fish and other aquatic organisms being or having gills. And that is its basal characteristic because it is shared among many different groups of aquatic animals and it is believed to have evolved early in their history. On the other hand, we have what we call as derived characteristics, which are quite unique to a particular group of organisms, and commonly we regard them as more recently evolved. Looking at the example that we have here, say for example, if we refer to the vertebrae, among all the organisms here, we can say that the vertebrae is a basal characteristics. However, if we say for example, hair, the hair part is actually exclusive to the primates and the rabbits group. So that taxon has what we call as a derived characteristic. In the same way, if we look at the eggs with shells, which is exclusive for crocodiles and birds in this example, we may refer to that as a derived characteristic. So to sum up everything, think of macroevolution as a skyscraper and developmental biology as the blueprint that guides its construction. The skyscraper is the end result of many small-scale construction activities, just as macroevolution is the result of many small-scale evolutionary changes. The blueprint provides the instruction for how to build the skyscraper. So just as developmental biology provides the instruction for how to build an organism. And in the long run, when there are many organisms that are being built, we tend to see it in a bigger picture that relates now to macroevolution. Because as mentioned, just as the blueprint for skyscraper is considered to be a set of detailed instruction that guide the construction, Developmental biology provides the instruction that guide the development of an organism from a single cell to a complex multicellular being. And just as the skyscraper can be modified or expanded over time, the instructions in the blueprint can also be modified or adapted to suit the needs of the construction project. At this point of time, I will now give the floor to the next reporter, Miss Iana Manus.